the Progressive Policy Institute released a report, you released a report on behalf of the Progressive Policy Institute about the student loan debt crisis in America. Now, before we get into the specifics of that report and sort of what that report and what the policy solutions are, which is what PPI does great, talking about policy solutions, let's sort of talk about how did we get here? How did this bubble, or I guess balloon, whichever way you want to describe it, come into being?
That's a great question, and I love that you use the word balloon because that's exactly the way that I think about it, because I don't think it needs to burst. I think that if we are proactive and thinking about student debt and address it now, we can deflate it slowly. So that's great. I thank you very much for having me on tonight. I think student debt is a really important issue, and it's pretty simple to think about how we got here. Basically, you've got a humongous rise in tuition. It's increased 72% over the last decade. And at the same time, you've got college students that are experiencing falling real earnings. So their real earnings have fallen 15% over the last decade. So the same period, about $10,000 annually. So they're less likely to be able to pay it. And you throw in the spice that you can't discharge these loans in bankruptcy like you can any other loan, and you've kind of got a stew of bad things in that you've got excessive debt and you've got less ability to pay for it, and so you end up with a lot of student debt. So that's how we're at $1 trillion and counting.
Now, speaking about, explain, and I think just if you can go a little bit more in depth of why it is not, because we've heard a lot of economists and a lot of experts call it, a bubble, and like just like the housing crisis was a bubble. Why is the student loan debt crisis not quote unquote a bubble and more so a balloon?
Well, I actually think it is a type of bubble, but I think it's a balloon because of how we can slowly deflate it. It's if we use the right program, the right policies to slowly, because right now it's $1 trillion, but if you sort of allow students to refinance their debt, maybe give them a haircut, you can slowly reduce that exposure, you can slowly reduce that burden to them. So it doesn't have to be a make or break hit. You can, there are ways that we can responsibly reduce their burden slowly in a way that's manageable for them, in a way that we can, pay that off. That being said, I actually think that it's worse than the typical bubble because first of all, you've got the same flavor of a bubble in the sense that you've got this artificial value that's increasing, so that's tuition, and then it's fueled by low-cost money, and that's government aid, and the government has its hands tied. It really has no choice but to lend you that money, or it's essentially arguing against equal access and opportunity. So it's kind of a recipe here that is you really can't do much about. And then you add in the fact that these are uncollateralized loans. You have no house that you can go reclaim, no boat, and you can't discharge these loans in bankruptcy. It's basically saying that, if you don't do anything now, if these debts go bad, you're going to take a full 100% hit because there's nothing you can do to compensate. There's no collateral underneath these loans.